If the green light's on, doesn't mean it's on?
Yes.
Okay. Mayor Martini and honorable council members, my name is Dan Venters, representing operating engineer members. Both of our bargaining units have offered to participate in concessions with Sparks Management. The supervisory group offered a 10% temporary concession for 2 years, and the non-supervisory have offered a 7.5% temporary concession for 1 year. In exchange, we've asked for no more layoffs for 1 year and see if the city fiscal deficit actually improves for fiscal year 2011-12. Our bargaining units believe that this would be the best method because there is a good chance that the economy is going to turn around and maybe the city won't have to lay off. We were approached in December with one deficit number. It looked close to 4.25%. In February it changed, and in March once again it changed, and it's now a $5 million deficit over 2 years. We don't truly believe that the management can predict out for 2 years where the city's at, and with that in mind, we would like to hopefully avoid layoffs. The next point I would like to make is approximately 2 weeks ago, the city approved 5.8, 5.9, and 5.10 on the agenda. There were 9 people that were giving reorganization and anywhere from 10 to 30% increases in their pay ranges. Of these 9, 5 or 6 of them are in the mid-management bargaining unit, which is the only bargaining unit that agreed to the 15% cut, 7.5% this year, and 7.5% next year. So that means at least 5 or 6 of these people are going to get a 5% increase this year as well as next year, and truly are only suffering a 2.5% cut each year. We were told by management's negotiating team that these people were doing extra duties and working out of classification. They probably are, but I believe if you talk to any of our OE3 members, you will find that they'll be telling you that they have a lot of extra duties and are probably working out of classification a lot also. So why won't they be reorganized instead of laid off? I will close by asking you, Mr. Mayor, and the City Council to do the difficult thing and not lay off employees. You and the public really need these employees. Please accept the concession ideas offered. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Questions, Mr. Schmidt?
Mr. Venters.
Thank you for coming today to go ahead and talk. I just want to make sure that I've got some information you gave, which is different than what I have, and I wanted just to ask a couple of questions on it. You've offered up 7.5% one-time, 1 year only concessions, right? So next year we'd be right back into this situation again.
Temporary cuts, yes.
In exchange for that temporary, you've also asked for increased personal days from 2 to 4 each year?
We asked for those things in our original proposals, yes.
So you want to increase additional days off for each employee from 2 days to 4 days. So each employee gets 2 additional days off with pay in exchange for the 7.5%.
Correct.
And you're also looking
negotiating, yes.
And you're also looking for an increase in the maximum accrual cap? What are you asking?
For the annual leave.
For the annual leave. What kind of increases are you looking for in that?
A 40-hour increase.
So you want?
They currently have a 460-hour, could take it to 500 hours.
So they got to accrue up to 500 hours of
Right.
of comp time. Then you're asking for 88 additional annual leave hours for every employee who gave up the 4.25 in this fiscal year?
In furlough days, yes.
So that would be another 11 days a year off.
That would only be upon retirement in good standing.
Okay. And you're asking
Resignation,
for
retirement, yes,
increase in sick leave accrual rates?
yes.
you're asking for an additional, besides the 7.5%, you're asking for additional 2% COLA on July 1st, 2010, and 2% January 1st of 2011. So you're giving up 7% and you want 4% back right away.
No, we asked for that to be deferred. All we want is to
Oh,
be...
until we can afford to pay for it.
Right.
Okay, and so I'm not sure what that means until we can afford to pay for it.
So that somewhere down the line that we already have those base numbers built in, so that when the city is back on their feet fiscally sound, that those increases are already built in.
And what, I'm not sure what that means. I mean, does that mean that all further funds that come into the city go to your bargaining group first? Is that what you're trying to tell me here?
No, we're just saying
So
that that's
we
why
can't-
we want to try to negotiate for the future, because right now we're negotiating a deficit for the future. So we're trying to put things in that potentially are not going to be immediate cost items that could be considered in the future.
So what you're offering is 7.5% to get through the first 12 months. You get that back in July, and you have additional benefits.
Only if the city can afford it.
Additional benefits you're asking for of around $1.2 million after that, if we can afford the $1.2 million.
I'm not sure what the numbers are. We took a lot of things off the table. These were all original proposals.
Okay, so are you saying that what I have is not your last proposal?
I don't believe that the annual leave and the sick leave, according to what management's negotiating committee told us, was an immediate cost. That
Okay,
was a
but is it on the
future cost.
proposal or not on the proposal?
Yeah, they were proposals.
So all
They were
this is on your
proposals, yes.
proposals? So this is your final offer here? You give up
No, we were
$954 this
negotiating.
year?
We run out of days to negotiate before we could come to here. We had a lot of other proposals that were withdrawn as well. The only proposals that we've had from the city is concessions. We had proposals that our bargaining unit had brought forth.
I guess my question is real simple. I have to, and the other comment you had is $5 million over a 2-year period deficit.
That's what we were told, 4.993, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, it's per year. That's for the next 2 years. It's $5 million each year.
Yeah.
It's not $5 million for over 2 years, it's $5 million this year. And if things continue on the downward trend, which all economists say
Yes.
it probably is in Nevada, it's $5 million. So we have a $10 million problem, not a $5 million problem. So to me, it looks like we have some real confusion going on here, that we're trying to cut the budget, trying to meet our budget numbers and revenue forecast, and we're actually spending more money next year than we ever dreamed we could even during the good years' times, we weren't getting $1 million a year in.
I'm telling you that just like we told the management committee, that we're trying to negotiate. All that we have heard from the city is, no, we got to have permanent pay cuts. We're trying to figure angles of stuff that could potentially benefit our bargaining unit in the future.
And were you ever told in your negotiations that that was a directive the city council gave
Yes.
staff, that we were looking for permanent cuts?
Yes.
Okay, so that direction came from the city
Permanent pay
council?
cuts is a serious thing whenever you're trying to figure it over a 2-year period.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Okay, next we have Amy Kokenar, followed by Jeffrey House. You have 3 minutes, Amy.
My name is Amy Kokenauer. I'm a dual homeowner in Sparks. My children go to school in Sparks, my husband works in Sparks, and I love living here. I always recommend my friends and family move here whenever they are moving into the area. There are about 108 sworn officers for the city of Sparks. The Department of Justice said in 2004 that the national average for full-time officers is 1.8 officers per 1,000 citizens. The number of Sparks citizens is around 92,000. According to national averages, Sparks is short about 70 officers. While the 108 officers are sworn officers, the number of officers who patrol the city is small. That's not safe for our city or for our officers. The average response time for an officer to respond to a Priority 1 call is currently 6 minutes. I don't want to see this increase. In the last year, there have been a few things that have worried me with regard to the number of officers on patrol. A business we frequent was broken into at night. The business owner arrived 10 minutes before the police. Our home was graffitied on. As I go through the older neighborhoods in Sparks, I'm seeing more and more graffiti on garages and fences. If we cut police numbers, we will see more property damage. In the case of the graffiti on our home, I went to the police station to make the report so that I wouldn't tie up a patrolling officer's time. If we cut the front desk or close the front desk, this will be added to patrolling officers' duties. My friend's home was broken into and squatted in for 2 weeks. When they returned to the home, there was debris scattered ankle-high throughout the house. A neighbor told her that her daughter and son-in-law had broken into the house and lived there. If we cut detectives, crime like this will never be investigated. I don't like knowing that if my home has less than $2,500 of damage, that it's not important enough to investigate. If we cut police officers, assistants, detectives, or support staff, we will see a rise in crime. With increased load, officers will be unable to serve and protect us as much. We might as well say, welcome to Sparks. Come on in and steal us blind. We don't have enough officers to protect us. We need to keep our community safe and help protect those who protect us. They work hard and they're committed professionals. Don't open our city to any more crime. Keep our families and our officers who serve and protect us safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Jeffrey House, followed by Gene Ryback.
My name is Jeffrey House.
What's that? That's Gene.
I'm here to comment on the proposed budget plan. I currently work at the city garage as an equipment mechanic too, and will be laid off if this plan is implemented. I was hired in September last year, and since that time feel that I've become part of a family. Everyone I have encountered in my brief time with the city has shown a positive can-do attitude and a love for their job. The city is not a business. We don't sell anything and are not profit-driven. We provide a service to the community. The employees are our biggest asset. Without them, our ability to provide this service will be diminished. Therefore, I believe the conclusion that maintaining a certain gap between base revenue and wages is the wrong way to achieve our goals of reducing the budget. As I mentioned before, I feel that I'm part of a family, and in my family, when my base revenue goes down, I don't tell my kids sorry, but in order to maintain my lifestyle, I'm going to have to lay you off. No. I cut my expenses and focus on the things I really need to survive. In the budget proposal, the conclusion was made that wages and compensation are equal to 94% of base revenues, and further that this amount has increased considerably since 2005. It should be noted that base revenues have decreased during this time, and subscribing an arbitrary number to calculate a wages to revenues ratio seems unfair. While wages and compensation may rise slightly, revenues will always fluctuate. Please also note that in this time, the cost for services and supplies has increased along those same lines. These figures indicate to me that the city's expenses, whether it's wages or cleaning supplies, have risen along with inflation. Many of the people I work with have expressed a desire to work with the city by taking a temporary pay cut until things get better. The desire to make it a permanent one seems unfair considering the cost of living keeps rising. These fellow workers are recently having trouble making ends meet. Let's work together to find a solution to this problem.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Gene Ryback, followed by Dick, is it Kirby?
Curtly.
Curtin?
Kurt Lee.
Say again?
Kurt Lee.
Kurt Lee, okay. Gene, go ahead.
Mayor, Council, Gene Ryback, President, Sparks Chief Officers Association. I'm here just to reiterate some of the points I want to make sure you gentlemen and ladies have heard, and that both the chief officers and the firefighters bargaining groups are in a unique position because we have a signed contract through June 30th, 2011. I believe as firefighters, we understand the needs of the city, and last year, we voluntarily, under no obligation, deferred our 4.2% COLAs. This year, seeing the economic crisis really manifest itself, we have voluntarily, once again, offered to meet the number the city manager put forward, equaling 7.5%. We're under no obligation. We're not negotiating with the city. And yes, our offer is contingent on it being a temporary pay concession, wage concession. And we feel very strongly that to take $650,000, which was estimated the value of our two packages to be together, and to say because it's not permanent, not to take it to avoid layoffs is somewhat irresponsible. And I could see if we had an open contract where we would be negotiating that the council, city manager could take a different approach to that. But it's really confusing for both memberships as to we have an offer on the table, and why not take that offer coupled with the chief offering $200,000 of his overtime budget to meet the mark set for the department by the city manager. Let us manage our own budget. We were given a mark to make. That mark was made, if you accept the fact that it's a temporary concession, and avoid the layoffs and the reduction of service to the citizens of Sparks.
Thanks, Gene. Questions? Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Gene, for the presentation. I've gone over this with staff already. Maybe during the meeting today, you can sit down and meet with staff. I'm not coming up with the 7.5% from what staff is giving me, and your numbers that you've posted and staff numbers. They're, let's see, 300, 450, 550. You're about $150,000, $200,000 off between what you guys say that you've offered and what staff is saying. So if you guys could, in the course of the next meeting, get back and, agree upon exactly what the numbers are that you're offering, because there's a $200,000. You're saying you're giving up $750. Staff saying you're giving up $500, or you've offered to give up $500.
Well, I think the contention, Ron, is going to be that the value of our pay raises is 4.2%, okay, and that the cost to the city is only 3.15 because they're staggered 2.1 and 2.1.
So it's a 3.15% savings and not a 4.2, and you're thinking it's a 4.2.
Well, it's 4.2% cumulative out of the wages of the firefighters, but the budgeted cost to the city is only 3.15.
Maybe, I'm not going to sit here and argue the numbers. I can tell you what 2.1 for 6 months plus 4.2 equals for 6 months, what that equals over a 12-month period of time. I need the dollar amount. I'm not going to argue what percentage it is. I need the dollar amount. If that's where you guys are off, then get an accountant in here to explain to the city why 2.1 plus 2.1 is 4.2 over a 12-month period of time.
Well, I think
that's where, we need to have the dollar, we need to agree on the dollar amount. That's what we need to agree upon. We can't sit down and say, well, this is a percentage, we'll calculate this way, percentage calculated this way. The bottom line is, what is the dollar?
And I do believe that if we sit down like that, if that is truly something that we can agree upon, I think that the numbers are right there, so.
Okay, well, we got about probably 30 minutes to get it agreed upon, so thank you.
Well, would that include the fire chief's cut of $200,000 of overtime pay?
I have what my offer is right here, okay, what the city says your offer is. If it's different than what I have in my hand right now, I need to know, before we make the budget decision, what the dollar amounts are.
Well, this is kind of unique, Ron, because I hope the city manager did report to you that in our meeting last week, he said, yes, we would accept these cuts if they were permanent.
And are they permanent?
No.
Okay, so then they're not acceptable.
So you would prefer not to take that money and pay us pay raises over the next fiscal year is what I'm understanding.
I'd like to have accurate information in front of me. If the information I have is different than what you have, I need to know that. I've already asked staff to go ahead and do it. I'm asking you to get, in the next 30 minutes, sit down with staff, get your accountant in here, whatever it takes to do it. We've had 5 months now since we started this process. I need to have accurate numbers on the table. You say one thing, they say something else. Get somebody in here to sign affidavit saying, Chief Ryback is correct. These are the numbers, these are the savings. I need to have something. Right now, my staff has a number. I have to believe them that this is a correct number. You say it's differently, I need to know what the correct number is.
And I need to know, we have been asking for months, and I don't want to speak out of turn for the fire chief, but we've been struggling with trying to find a number of what the true cut would be, just like the gentleman from Local 3 said. And that number has changed repeatedly. Okay, so if we're talking about 7.5% from the department budget, if the fire chief comes together with the labor groups and meets that number, temporary, what does it mean to the city council?
And I'll say the same thing I said to Dan. In January, City Council gave direction to the city manager. Reason why we're here today, there's only one reason why we're here with this couple, but there's a main reason why we're here, because we all did temporary last year. Everybody did temporary. So we have a cumulative problem from last year, and we have the additional drop fall from this year. In January, the City Council gave the city manager direction to have permanent cuts on the table, so we're not here next year doing this all over again. You can take that whatever way you want to. I mean, you can say, no, we're not going to do it. City council's crazy, whatever. That was the direction we asked the city manager
Well,
to do.
the fact that there's a closed contract with two of your bargaining groups makes that hard to really digest that information.
You know, it's a public meeting. I mean, we said it in a public meeting. There was all departments were represented in that meeting. I don't know how much more public you can get with it.
Okay. So
Thank you.
basically, these two bargaining groups are not negotiating. They're offering $650,000 to the city, and right now what I'm hearing is if it's not permanent, the city's going to turn down $650,000 and put firefighters on the street.
First off, I don't have $650,000 on the table. You may think you have $650,000, the staff says something differently. You need to get that problem solved. That number one problem, you need to get your numbers correct, chief. Then once that's done, it is the city council's decision whether they'll accept a temporary cut or demand permanent cuts.
Okay, Mr. Kerrigan.
Gene, thanks. I was going to ask us of the union president, but he didn't put in the card, and I don't even know if he's here, so maybe you can answer this for him, because you said that if we do this, we're going to be irresponsible. And this, to me, was kind of an irresponsible quote that you guys put out there, and I want you to tell me what you really meant by it. But you said at your press conference that you can't say with certainty that when people call 911, we will have an engine company ready to respond. What is it? Can you explain that to me?
First of all, I don't like the bag, but that was President Kavanaugh's statement.
Okay, but he's not here. Okay, all right, but we're, okay.
Well, but I can answer it, and
Okay.
I think we've discussed in our staff meetings, what are we going to do if these layoffs occur, and then we have to shut an engine company down? Okay, if we shut an engine company down, it's logical that if the other engine company in the station is already on a call, we're going to have to draw a resource in from somewhere else in the city, which is going to be a delayed response.
So you're not going, but the way it says here, that's not what the quote is. The quote sounds like, and this is where I'm calling it irresponsible, the quote sounds like if we lay off any firefighters, that you're not going to be able to respond to 911. That's what the quote says. And and the reason I'm bringing this up is because when people called me, that's the quote they use. And then the other quote I'd like you to do.
Now, can I
Okay.
just continue to respond? And the quote is somewhat true, because to meet the NFPA standard of getting what we need on scene to mitigate a structure fire, if we launch one rig out of every station, that's only going to be 15 people, and hopefully get some safety officers to show up. And then every single station in the city of Sparks is going to be emptied.
Well,
So-
from what the chief told me, that even at a structure fire, you roll 15 people anyway. So that's five engines on one structure fire.
Well-
So if we have a structure fire in Sparks, 5 engines roll, is that correct?
Now, yes, because two years ago, when we had 4-person staffing, 4 engines.
And
were
also
responding.
at the same meeting, the chief said, we're not going to talk about 4-person engine companies anymore, because the way we have it set up in Sparks, we don't need that anymore. And that was a direct quote from the assistant chief. I guess that was Frank Freebelt basically said that, because I looked at the numbers of, I pulled a bunch of numbers for graveyard shift. okay, as far as police and fire response. And I was trying to say, well, maybe we don't need that many people on at night, okay? And this is how the conversation started, about can you respond to 911 calls? And the answer I got was, if there's a structure fire, 15 firefighters are going to respond. The way we have the trucks, I think we have one truck with 4 people on it, and all the rest of the trucks have 3. So in essence, we're sending at least 4, maybe 5 trucks. Is that correct? So anytime you have...
Right now, all our staffing is down to 3.
Right. There really isn't going to be any difference, because anytime we have a structure fire, that's every unit in the city. Is that not
If
correct?
we're shutting, no, because we have 7 units right now
Right.
that are staffed with 3. So 2 units would remain in service to handle
Okay.
any other EMS calls.
But you roll 15 anyway. So we roll 5 trucks on a structure fire. Okay.
Right now, yes.
Right. Okay. And so the other quote that really bothered me more than that is the one in the Sparks Tribune that said, people will be killed if we as a city council cut some firefighters' jobs. That scared people. That to me is irresponsible, because to me, that's, something that, if a firefighter says that, people are going to believe it. Do you believe that people are going to get killed if we cut some of the firefighters?
Well, on any given day, citizens in the city can be hurt and killed, and firefighters...
You sound like a politician now. I just asked the question.
That's perfect. You guys have been training me well.
Yeah, great, but see, these are the kind of questions that I have to get, that I have to answer when somebody reads in the newspaper and says, the fire department said people will be killed. Okay, that to me is scary. That's scare tactics. You want to say you're responsible? I call them scare tactics. You're just trying to scare people to say, gee, if we don't have, if we do away with, 11 firefighters because you guys didn't want to do a 7.5% permanent cut. And let me tell everybody in here right now, we would not have all of you here if everybody decided to give up 7.5% permanent. We wouldn't have to be here. But we are here, and we're going to make a decision. And what's going to happen after that decision, whichever way it goes, we're going to get blamed for it up here, okay? And it's something you do, we get the blame, okay? That's okay with me. We're the leadership up here, we'll take it. But I just want to say that none of us would be here, well, we would be, but it'd be a very short meeting if everybody took 7.5%. I just want to put that out. And I understand, wait a minute, let me finish, because 4.5% was on the table first. That's what we thought the deficit was going to be. And unbeknownst to us, something happened. It's called the economy. So now we're asking for 7.5%. Everybody gave 7.5%, we wouldn't have to have people coming up and say, I'm losing my job. And no, it's not easy for me to cut somebody's job. But I want to tell you something right now. I'm not the one cutting it. I believe it's the union leadership that's doing it, because I wanted to know if we lay off 11 firefighters, I want to know if any of them are here, because I want to know how they voted. I'll bet you they didn't vote to do their job. I'll bet you they voted for a 7.5% pay decrease so they wouldn't lose their job. So what I see it is, senior firefighters, senior, OE3, senior cops, they're going to throw the youngest guys under the bus if they didn't take the cut. That's how I see it.
Mike, first I'd like to address the people dying comment. Unfortunately, that was sent out in a press release, and that reporter did us a disservice by not talking to anybody before he just pasted and cut. So, okay, that happens all the time on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, but you know what, Gene? If I'd have got up on Friday and got out there in front of the whole thing before you guys did, and I said something outrageous like that, what would you have done to me? What would your union have done? You probably would have called me, I would have had the calls from your union going, how dare you go out in front of the public and say that? And that's exactly what I'm telling you. How dare you send out a release saying we're going to kill people? That bothers me more than anything else.
Well, I'm
Okay?
sorry it bothers you, but this is what bothers me, Mike, is the fact that when the city was running good, let's say 2004, and we had a signed closed contract, and we said, boy, you guys are running a structural excess in the ending fund balance. Mr. Carey, we would like to have you give us a pay raise. What would Mr. Carey's response be? It would be, you have a signed contract that's closed for the next 2 years. Wait until it comes open for negotiations.
Okay, so what you're saying, you have a signed contract?
Yes.
And you have one more year left, is that correct? That you get
June 30th, 2011.
Okay, and let's let everybody know, because a lot of people don't know, that you have a 4% COLA in there, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and you want that 4% COLA?
We want to temporarily defer it again.
Okay, so what you're saying is you're
And
going
then
to give
when
up
it
something
comes
you
time
don't
to
have?
negotiate,
No, you're...
yes, no, we've negotiated that. There's a benefit we
But do you
negotiated.
have, okay, but that's not what we asked for. We didn't ask for something that's that's down the road. We said 7.5% of what you make today.
Mike, if
Isn't that
we
what
had,
we said?
if we had taken the pay raise last year,
Mhm.
then it would be something we could give back to you.
Right, and if you would have taken the pay raise last year, somebody would have probably been laid off last year.
Okay, well, that's last
So
year.
what
Now we're
you're
talking
saying right
about this.
now.
No,
this-
what you're
that's a-
telling me.
No, and look, we're talking about money here. You're saying right now that the majority, because I don't know how your vote was, but the majority of the union members would rather take their 4% COLA than to keep 11 firefighters working. That's what you're telling me.
Mike, we're willing to defer them. It has a monetary value to the city. Ask the city
It
manager.
has a temporary monetary value that as soon as we do that, in the next year, it's going to go up from whatever it is to probably 1.2 million. So we're putting a Band-Aid on it, and it's not going to work.
And next year, do you do 2-year budgets on this council?
We do 5-year, actually. When I first got here, remember, I pushed for 5 years, and we even got some of the bargaining units to do a 5-year
But you
contract.
balance the budget on a yearly basis.
Well, we're in trouble right now. And once again, I have to go back to what I said in the beginning. If everybody would have taken a 7.5% pay cut, because that's where we started, all the negotiations started at 7.5%.
Mike, and then I can say.
No, you could say anything you want. The fact of the matter is, if everybody would have taken a 7.5% pay cut, we wouldn't be here today, and that is a fact. And I don't care what fact sheet you put out, I don't care what fact sheet OE3 put out, I don't care what fact sheet the police department put out, that is a reality. If every single working person in the city of Sparks would have taken a 7.5% pay cut, we wouldn't be here today.
Why do you think it's necessary to balance the budget of a city the size of Sparks on the backs of the employees?
Because we have 93% of our budget is salaries. Where do we go? We going to balance it on the other 7%?
Mike?
I mean, do we take the 7%? We have 93% of the money that we have in the city goes to salaries, 93%. Outrageous. That's
because
outrageous.
everything else has been cut. Mike, there's a downtown redevelopment district that you gentlemen voted on to extend another 15 years. That money would have come
Okay,
in.
why don't you bring in the apples and oranges, because let's go on the legends now with Star Bonds, let's go on all those other things, because you know darn well, Gene, that those are different pots of money, and you don't pay salaries out of room tax, and you don't pay salaries out of Star Bonds, so let's not go there, and the public doesn't
But
understand that,
The
but
public
you
doesn't
all do.
understand because police
Wait,
and
hey,
fire.
let's,
I'm sorry.
no, wait a
Police-
minute.
Police and
Let's
fire
cool-
salaries are
Let's
not.
cool down a minute here, just, and be like adults here, please.
Yes, sir.
Let's make this a,
Police and fire salaries are not paid out of, whenever a fire engine goes to the Sparks Nugget, those salaries of those firefighters are not paid out of downtown redevelopment. They're paid out of the general fund. When cops go to the Olive Garden to break up a fight, those salaries don't come out of the Star Bonds or any tax revenues there. Okay, that's something you're right. The citizens don't understand that, and I wish they would. That way I wouldn't have to be standing here or sitting here talking, impassioned. They would be calling you on the phone, and I guarantee you it would be more than 5 phone calls. And maybe this is the format we needed to educate the citizens as how all the monies have been diverted. You're going to approve in this proposed budget $916,000 to go from the general fund to a defunct community development enterprise fund. For what? So developers can get a free ride, so everything can get sped up for them when the economy bounces back? Let's get all these issues out on the
You
table.
know what, Gene, I asked for this since I was a city councilman, that we should do all negotiations in public. And every union in this city said no, because it's a union call. I would love to do this in public. I'm serious. I think this is great. I think everybody should hear all this.
Absolutely.
Okay, you're absolutely right. But thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
let's move on. Questions, Julia Ratty.
Hi, Julie.
Hi. And of course, when I chimed in was quite a while ago, so I'm thinking I still want to do this, but there's just 2 comments that I feel the need to clarify, because I think it's important that everybody understand this. And I want to make sure this is clear. The one gentleman said we and the public need these employees, and I absolutely agree with that. The level of service that we've hit in our city has gotten to a point where it's unfortunate for everybody. And whether we're talking about responding to an emergency medical service call, or we're talking about a police officer being available when you're in crisis, or we're talking about having good, high-quality, low-cost programs for your children in the Parks and Rec Department, or we're talking about maintaining our streets, across the board, the level of service is no longer acceptable, and the only way we can maintain those service levels, and that's what I'd like to bring it back around to, is service levels, is if we keep all those employees on board. So you're absolutely right. We need them, and the public needs them. That said, then another comment that you made is that you were given a mark to make, and you made it. And a lot of the phone calls that I've been getting in response to the media are, why wouldn't you accept temporary concessions? And so I want to address that directly so everybody knows at least what my answer is about why we would not accept a temporary concession. When we started this conversation of the 7.5, it was 7.5 in the first year, permanent, and then 7.5 again in the second year, permanent, which I understand completely is a huge thing to ask from our employees. That's a 15% permanent cut. It's a lot to ask. But we needed that 15% to address the structural deficit. If we didn't get that entire 15% over 2 years, then we still have the problem. And the 7.5% in the first year still left us burning reserves. What we were saying as a city is that we'll take 7.5, we want to take that 15%, which is what we really need, and spread it out over 2 years so that the employees and all their families have time to adjust, that it's not July 1, 15% has gone out of your paycheck. So if we don't get the 7.5% permanent in the first year and have no guarantee of that in the second year, the books don't balance. If we were to accept the concessions that are on the table today from all the groups, and I'm not picking on anybody, if we were to accept all of the concessions from all the groups, we would still have to lay off 28 employees. The number doesn't get us there. And at least 2 of those groups, when they said, okay, here's our temporary 7.5, whether it's 7.5, 6.8, whatever it is, here it is, they put a condition on that said no layoffs. So we're going to give you this less than what you've asked for, and we're going to tell you you can't lay us off. The math doesn't work. If we accept everybody's concessions the way they were presented with their final offer, 28 positions still need to go away. That's the problem that I have, sitting here as a council member. So I can't make the bottom line work with the concessions that the labor groups have offered. For us to save everybody's job, we need 7.5% this year, 7.5% next year, and we need it to be permanent. Because if it resets, we have the same $5 million problem next year. And moreover, if we just take the 7.5% from everybody this year, we still have a hole. It doesn't balance. And I don't know that that has been clear for everyone. That, you met your mark, but you met your mark based on a budget that was burning the last of our reserves so that we could get to another mark the next year. That's the 2-year budgeting. We were trying to do the right thing and ease it in for everybody. So I can't tell you what I'm going to do because I'm waiting to hear what everybody else has to say, but I can tell you if we accepted the concessions that all the labor groups have given us today, we don't meet the mark, and we still have 28 people to lay off.
I noticed that.
Sorry, Gene, that's not fair.
Okay, Mr. Schmidt, then
Thank
let's
you, Mr.
move on.
Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ratty, too, for the clarifications. And Chief, I know it's as hard for you to be there as it is for us to be out there. This is not a comfortable situation. I appreciate your time for being here. I appreciate what you have to go through here to get this done. I guess for me, it's very simple as this. I like to have the math worked out. You and staff make sure you agree upon the numbers that you have, so everybody's working on the same sheet music. And to me, I take into consideration, because you do have a contract, you do have a 4.2% raise coming next year. That is due to you. I think that's part of your bargaining. We agreed upon it. I will accept that as part of your 7.5% concession. I think that's fair, because we have an agreement. Let's live by the agreement. Take the 7.5%. But I think the issue comes back down to the city council wanted a 7.5% permanent reduction. So my advice would be to get your numbers cleaned up with each other, then go back to your members and say, hey, look, guys and gals, we can save all these jobs. Let's put 7.5% across the board. I'll give you the 4.2 as part of your 7%, whatever you guys, staff, can agree on what that number actually is, and let's move forward. And we don't have to lay anybody off. I think everybody can live with that. It's only reducing 2.5% of your salary from what you're living on right now, what everybody's getting right now, because we're going to build that 4.2 back in for you. And let's get resolved, and let's get this problem behind us. If we don't take action this year, as Ms. Ratty said, the problem compounds next year by squared. I mean, we just keep snowballing this whole thing. That's why we're here, and that's why the problem is so intense today, because we did temporaries last year. And so, we need to take that message back and see if we can move this thing forward. I think, in a week, we can have this thing resolved. We got till March the 17th to have it done, but let's don't continue burning this time, because I think it's valuable time. We need to move forward with it.
Ron, you said a couple of those things really fast. Could somebody write those down? Could you?
I will
could you
be
run
more than
through it
happy
again?
to sit down and talk to you, and let's get 7.5% permanent concessions on the table. Now, I can't speak for the rest of the council what they're going to say, but I think 7.5% of permanent concessions, you guys get your numbers where you both agree upon the numbers.
Mr. Smith?
I just want to chime in here for a minute, Gene. There's not one person up here who wants to lay anybody off in this city anytime, a year ago, next year, anything else. The facts are, we have a budget that we have to live by. We don't have the money. And I understand fully that when we reduce your salaries, or you reduce your salaries by 7.5%, it doesn't take your bills down 7.5%. You still have obligations that you have to meet. This is a tough deal for all of us. But the main thing is, we do not have to lay anybody off. Not one person, if everybody takes the concessions, and a permanent one. And then we can move on.
Mr. Adams?
I think what Councilman Kerrigan said about negotiating in public is certainly an accurate depiction of the law. I think that whatever is said up here by any individual councilman may be his or her personal thoughts on this particular matter. However, only those representatives authorized by the City of Sparks can make formal offers, accept formal contingencies, accept formal approvals by the unions themselves. So, as I understand, at least one council member has made himself personally available to you, but again, that cannot be part of the negotiating processes under Nevada law.
And Chad, the only thing I want to say is we're really not negotiating firefighters because we have a closed contract.
I understand that, sir.
Okay, let's move on. Dick Kirtley.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, can I just say something?
Sure.
I know I
Please.
used a lot of time, but I
Not
just...
you, but them.
No, we did.
All the above has.
Yeah, I don't think Mike and I don't want to speak for Mike, but we don't bear any ill will. It's just he's retired
Okay.
Navy, I'm retired Marine, so.
Just looks
That
confrontational,
says it
that's
all
all.
right there.
All right, Dick Kirtley, followed by Chris Crawforth.
I'd like to know why the city council and the city wants to always lay off people and don't want to negotiate. It's not the answer to not have anybody to do the jobs. And we're down to a skeleton crew, and you want to lay off. This thing's too much rack. We saw your proposal that was for 7.5% permanent this year, 7.5% permanent next year. And what if, we would have went with that, but why not temporary? Because maybe in 2 years, things are going to get better, and if not, then we'll take another 7.5%. But you can't see in the future, so why are you taking, as if you can, like, taking away from us? We'll be back like to 2003, our wages, and, I think everybody ought to take in this whole city. One guy made a suggestion that everybody in the city should get paid what a maintenance tube makes, and that's about $46,000.
I'll take it.
Yeah, but you're part-time. We work full-time. What's fair is fair. We haven't had a raise in 3 years, over 3 years, a cost of living or anything. And you can't see the future, so we were willing to take a temporary 15% pay cut and everything. Temporary, and then in 2 years, let's see how it's looking, maybe we'll have to take another one, but maybe things are going to work out good, You never know how the economy is going to work out. You can't see in the future, why make it permanent? Everybody's willing to take the 15% cut in their pay, and the thing is if you have a 4% or whatever thing in your contract is supposed to get a raise, I think you ought to be able to say, I'm going to have a little integrity and not take that, That's all I got to say.
Okay, questions, Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate you coming in. I just want to make sure you understand that the deal that was on the table, and I'll make sure clearly that the 7.5% this year with the reductions did not cover the deficit, that we were using money out of reserves to cover the rest of the, over $2 million. And that's why we're in a situation we're in now, because we can't take the money, out of reserves and not do the layoffs, because then it compounds the problem even more next year. Now, if we only had a 7.5% problem, then that would be, I mean, we could do it, but we're taking money, and that's why the asking for the cuts for next year, because we're using reserves this year. And this city operates on 1 month's reserve, and we're going to be taking almost half of that. So we'd have enough money.
50%.
Pardon?
We were going to go ahead with the 50%, but we wanted it to be temporary, so in case in 2 years the city gets better, you know, and if not, then we'll take some more. But this permanent is going to set us back, and, you know, I don't think it's fair. And right now, the taxpayers are all paying for services they're not getting because there's not enough people to do it.
No, 100% of the money goes out of the city. Every penny comes in and goes on out. So they are paying for the services. For every penny that taxpayer
I know
pays,
they're paying for
it goes
They're not
out in
getting
services. And I don't know how to take a penny.
Skeleton crew in the maintenance yard.
I don't know how to take a penny and make two out of it. I mean, there's only one agency that I know that can do that. I don't know how to do that. So every penny that comes in, that the taxpayers pay, go back out. So I'm just saying that the picture is very, very complicated. If you look at this in a 2-year to 5-year program, and if you look at what the economists are saying about the state of Nevada, you have 2 to 3 more years to go before we're going to see anything.
How do you know? The maintenance yard was willing to take 15% cut, and then in 2 years, look at it again and see, instead of layoffs and stuff, and you still couldn't guarantee no layoffs, but we were willing to do that, but you said, no, it's got to be permanent, not temporary, you know? Why should it be permanent?
Thanks, Mr. Kirtley. Chris Crawford?
Turn off this other mic, does it turn on the?
Probably.
Try that. Council and City Mayor, thanks for your time. My name is Chris Crawford. I represent the Sparks Police Protective Association. Due to the fact that we are currently in contract negotiations with the city, and out of respect for the ongoing discussions, I will not discuss the police union's current proposals or wage reductions to the city in these difficult financial times, as I feel we are close to the required objectives. I am requesting that no layoffs occur to police officers or the one and only female marshal at the municipal court, and also hope that no non-sworn layoffs occur, as this affects our level of service to the community. I will also discuss some things that have occurred to our officers this past year, and I would like to discuss the changes that the PD has done this year to deal with being short finances and people. First of all, we have not received a cost of living raise in 2 years. We have eliminated 6 police officer positions and currently average only 7 officers per hour that are available to the citizens of this community. This is no different than most departments within the city, as we are all short necessary positions. But like most of the city departments and employees, rather than continue to fall on national standards, the police officers of the city of Sparks have chosen to push on and complete the job they took an oath to perform at the same high levels of service that the citizens have come to expect of us. 2009 and 2010 have been exceptionally dangerous for our officers and the citizens of the community. In that time, 3 officers and 1 sergeant were attacked and shot at by assailants with firearms in 2 different altercations, coming close enough to tear one officer's uniform and striking a police vehicle several times in another. Luckily, none of our officers were injured. In 2009, there were 3 homicides, up from 0 in 2008, and there has been 1 so far in 2010. Unfortunately, 2 of the homicides involved children and 1 involved a teenager. However, our officers and detectives charged forward to capture the suspect in all of those cases, and all are awaiting trial. Just recently, a violent sexual predator attacked a Sparks resident. The suspect was also captured in a short time and is waiting trial. The changes we have made. Due to the decreased officers available for calls, we realign the procedure for response to calls so that officers respond to violent calls faster, reducing response time to priority calls by 4 minutes. Unfortunately, property crimes hold a little longer. The detective division moved to alternate schedules, making them more available to the citizens and saving the city and department an estimated $70,000. We have looked for and completed solutions that allow us to continue to serve the citizens of Sparks with high efficiency. And to the citizens of this community, regardless of what occurs here today, I promise the citizens that when you call 911, we will show up. Thank you to our non-sworn employees and volunteers that make it possible to continue providing the level of service that we have always provided our citizens. And to the council, thanks for your time in this difficult decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Questions, Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chris, I don't want to get into your contract negotiation, but I do want to say thank you. The numbers that I have here and the meeting we just got finished with, Police Officers Association, both, non-supervisory sergeants and lieutenants and all, they gave up permanent reductions. It's 5.4%. We asked for 7.5. It's 5.4. There's another percentage of givebacks in 12 in there, but you're still coming up with 5.4% in pay reductions, permanent across the board, with no strings attached, no conditions or anything else like that. And I think that's commendable. I mean, this is what the city council direction. I know we're 2% short on the deductions, and I think that I just want to let you know, as a council person, I appreciate you coming, and you've met us more than halfway on this. I know we still got some work to do to get the other 2% taken care of, but I do want to say thank you for coming through with that and helping us out.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience like to speak under public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to number 3, consideration and possible direction of city manager's tentative budget recommendations for fiscal year 2010-11. Mr. Carey. Mr. Cronk.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. How are you doing today?
Turn your mic on.
There we go. Now we're doing better, huh? There we go. Kill the feedback. There we go. What we have before you today is the recommended city manager's fiscal year 2011 budget before you today for your consideration discussion, what we've been dealing with today. I'm thinking I'm going to ask your help on this for a matter of time and direction on this. I'm going to ask for your guidance. I'm going to start going through this, but if any time you want to redirect me or cut me short on an area in order to move forward, please do. So, I'm just going to go ahead and plow forward, but I am going to try to keep it fairly.
Hit the highlights if you could.
Exactly. What I was thinking about doing primarily, I think what I can bring most to this discussion is a look on the revenues. Where we were, where we are now, and kind of where we're going. I think that's kind of the biggest question. So what I thought I'd do is just kind of do a little more of a brief look on this presentation and again, kind of hit some of the highlights. And then be available for questions and directions. So if that sounds reasonable, I think we can move forward with that. So I think I'm going to just move forward through these first few slides. These are just basically stating what the city's financial goals are and basically how we're not there. The first one is, we want to have an 8.3% fund balance equal to 8.3% of department expenditures. Right now, we've temporarily limited that to 5%, but we've been doing that for a couple of years now. So our other financial goal is to establish a contingency budget of about 3%, or not to exceed 3%. Right now, we have about a 1% planned. The third primary one, there's other ones, but these are the primary goals that we have, is to maintain a stabilization fund. And as we know, we've pretty much drained that in the previous fiscal year, 2009, to we've only got about $29,000 in there. So just to kind of give you an update of where we're at. Base revenues, you hear a lot of talk about that. It's the primary, I call them the 3 legs of the stool of the revenue sources that come in for the city: property taxes, consolidated and fair share taxes, and licenses and permits. Those 3 items make up 86 or more percent of the overall city revenue. Other parts of the city revenue obviously would be dominated by grant funds, interest, just other expenditures, or other revenue sources. But by far, the three largest one are these. And there's a lot that's tied into, if you even look back a decade or so, the dramatic rise that we had in these three revenue sources. And then, as I'm going to show you here, the real dramatic decline in these. And I'll try to paint a picture of why I think this is going to be a permanent or a very lengthy time to get out of this. This is kind of a very 10-year history of where we were.
Hold on a second, Jeff, got a question. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah,
Rick.
absolutely.
Jeff, for everybody's sake, I want to just cover a couple of items I can on the base revenues, especially when it comes to property taxes and consolidated fair share taxes, because that's our two biggest sources of revenue that we have in the city. You don't make these numbers up. These are numbers provided us from the Treasury for Washoe County for property taxes, and the state of Nevada, when it comes to sales tax projections, they have their top economists, forecasters doing this, and we know that they haven't been conservative enough. That's part of the problem with the states. And so these are numbers that someone else is providing for us, and we get a chance to go and alter them a little bit if we think that they're wrong. But you're not just taking and saying we're going to have you just woke up one night, thought that 7.3% drop in property taxes.
Yes and no. I don't do it in a vacuum, but I also don't rely completely on other agencies. There are a lot of unique aspects to the city's revenues that are unique to Sparks. Like, for example, the consolidated tax revenue, which I won't go into because it's extremely complicated, very complicated. But there are unique aspects well, actually, it's unique for every agency. Has their own unique twist on it, if you will. So I take those revenues that the state provides for us, and their projections, their estimates. They make their estimates based on the same information that I'm getting here. Take those and I tweak them, if you will, for the formula unique aspects that we have for the city of Sparks as well. But I'm also, I check around the state. I talk to the folks at the state. I talk to folks in southern Nevada, northern Nevada, all over the place. And these aren't my numbers. So it's a yes and no. It's we collaborate with each other, and I think you're going to see similar pictures throughout the state.
The why I think that's important that we talk about, because everybody wants to say that, in January, this was a 4.5% problem. Okay, well, March is when we get our numbers from the state when it comes to sales tax revenues and everything, and they vastly differ from what they were 6 months ago. So the state sees a continuing problem here, and that's the reason why we went from 4.5 to a 7.5 deficit this year, is because the economy has continued to deteriorate. That wasn't a decision you arbitrarily made, saying, well, let's make this a really bad-looking picture here so we could go ahead and get more money and cut do more layoffs. This is, across the state this is happening, and I want to make sure people understand it wasn't just something that happened in March that we decided to do. It's a statewide problem.
Correct. And part of the distribution formula on sales taxes, and primarily the difference from where we were and how we got here, is a loss in sales taxes, no doubt about it. We've dropped about approximately 40% from our peak in 2006 to what we're expecting to get in 2011. 40% is extreme, is an extreme drop in a very short time period. So, yes, to answer your question, I mean, that's not, it's not an arbitrary, or even something you come up with at a whim.
And maybe trivia question for everyone out there, there's only 2 counties in the state of Nevada that aren't guaranteed property or sales taxes. 15 out of 17 counties are guaranteed every single month to get their check, no matter how bad their property taxes are, and one of them is not Washoe County.
Yeah. And primarily, though, the economy, though, has really driven sales taxes. Well, I'll show you. Sometimes a picture speaks, yeah. I wanted to show this correlation because this is one of the reasons why I don't think we're going to be rebounding anytime soon unless we have a very large increase in the number of jobs. But this is basically tracking Washoe County sales, taxable sales, to, that's the blue line that you see down there, the one that's dropping rather dramatically, and the one that's rising is the unemployment number. And they've been eerily close, and it's rather scary to see an unemployment figure of 13.4%, which is where we're at right now. And I just don't see, nor, again, to your point, nobody in the state can see, and it just makes sense, too, where taxable sales can be driven going forward without jobs. Once that unemployment number gets down, then, we could expect to see an increase in the taxable sales. What's not built in here, and this is the difficult part that our organization faces, along with every other organization, I think, is what you're not seeing in this number, or in this picture here, is the effect of say a 7.5% pay decrease. That's going to take its effect too. Everybody's going to sit around the kitchen table, as it were, and try to figure out, well, we're going to have a lower income, and we've got to, maybe we don't have our premium cable, or maybe we don't have cable at all, or maybe we don't go out to eat and I start bagging my lunch, or these kinds of things. So this picture is actually worse than it really is, because this is just looking at the loss of jobs. And we really have to focus on the real impact that's going on throughout the whole county. And I know ours is not the only organization that's considering wage reduction as opposed to layoffs. I've been with several organizations before, and nobody wants to lay people off. And if you can get through by doing a concession, if you will, or a reduction in wages, that's preferable. If you keep people working, at least they're getting something. So anyway, this is just one piece of the puzzle, if you will. I wanted to include this one as well. It's kind of a funny looking chart, but it shows the seasonal trends for the last 5 years. And this particular chart, the very dark red line at the bottom is our current fiscal year, and we have data through January. So we kind of project it based, going out based on historical trends. I can't see how, say, February, March, April, May is going to be significantly higher than the previous year. It may. Again, this is probably more art than science in a lot of respects, but you have to wonder what's going to drive that. So that's pretty much how we look going forward. But one of the things I wanted to kind of bring out on this, if I could use this. Every year, this is July, August, and September, if you can kind of follow my little mouse here. This is just to kind of give you a flavor for what we're seeing. We always see these upticks. Starting in fiscal year 09, we had this thing roll over, and everybody knows what happened back in September and October of 08. Things were really melting and really starting to crash down all around us, both locally and nationally, particularly nationally. These are the things you look for when you say, uh-oh, something's happening. Something's going on fundamentally. And you see it again this year. We have this roll down in September, and you project it out. When we were sitting back here, I said, this is not good. You look for these things and you say, this is probably going to lead to a lower December, which of course comes into play. The problem with this is that we get data, and we get our actual receipts after the taxable sales occur. We get them 2 months later. So there's a real lag time in the actual information. So a lot of cases, we are trying to do our best to look forward when we don't have the full data and we don't have the full picture. So it gets real difficult. But you look at everything. For example, you're looking at down here, why did it roll over in September? Things were starting to improve again. Well, we had that cash for clunkers, if everybody remembers that right, back in August, and that actually did pop us up a little bit. So maybe August was actually artificially inflated high. Those are the kinds of things that we look for. If I come over here and I actually see February up in here, well, that might be a turn. That's what I'm looking for, something that turns. And right now, based on all the data I have, I just don't see anything that turns this picture. So that's what we have to deal with going forward. Another piece I wanted to just briefly bring up, I mentioned before that we lost approximately 40% of our C-tax revenue since 2006. In order to get that back, you'd have to see over a 2/3 increase. I mean, that's pretty dramatic. If you think about it from from your home, as a similar example. A lot of us, say you bought a house not too long ago in 2005, 6, 7, something like that. Say you bought it for $300,000, and let's say it's dropped in half, and it's now worth $150,000. Is it realistic to think that that $150,000 home is going to be $300,000 anytime soon? I don't think so. I just don't see how that's going to double. Normally, in fact, we may not want to see that again. That would probably cause another housing bubble. We don't want to go down that road. We've already been there again. The best thing that we could do is get back to a normal pattern. Maybe a 3 to 5% or a 2% or a 4% growth, something more manageable. What I wanted to show you on this chart here is, and the subsequent one, is the CTAX percentage of change that you're dealing with on an annual basis. These charts were frightening. You can imagine the whipsaw that you're dealing with. It was only just a couple of years ago, and this is a chart of looking at all the big 5 cities within Nevada, and just kind of give you a flavor that the entire state's dealing with this. Probably the most dramatic one is North Las Vegas there. They peaked out at increases of 25% growth, and now they're dealing with 20% or more losses in just a few short years. That's extremely difficult for agencies, especially government agencies, to deal with. Here's the assessed valuation. It's even more pronounced. Again, if I could use North Las Vegas as an example, just because they're the extreme, but we're all kind of facing the same battle here, going from a 45% increase down to a 30% increase in just about three short years here. That's extremely difficult to deal with. And I think you mentioned it before, governments spend money. We're not a profit organization. We don't hoard. We don't look to increase our retained earnings to benefit our shareholders. We spend it. We try to get citizen involvement and try to spend it the most wise way we can, but we do spend it. When you're spending what you have, now we have to deal with a much lower revenue picture in a very short time frame. It doesn't give you a whole lot of time to react.
Question,
yes?
Mr. Schmidt?
I'd like to, Jeff, before you leave CTAX, would like to maybe just, if we can, for educational purposes, talk about, you're saying that, if we get into a 3 to 5% growth mode, property values have to double before that, then using your 150 going to 300,000. With consideration of Nevada state law, which puts a 3% property tax cap max on residential property, as well as combined with property depreciation laws in the state of Nevada, at a 5% interest rate, how long would it take for a house to double in value? Property taxes to actually double in value?
Well, the value is probably not the main equation. It's
the revenue.
Absolutely.
The revenue.
It's really the, and again, there's a lag time on that, the way the assessed valuations work. But I think the key point that you're going to make there is absolutely right. Let's say it did double. Let's say it doubled within 2 years. We as a city will not get that revenue back. We're going to be capped at 3% of whatever is on your tax bill. Not what's on the assessed valuation, but what's on the tax bill. So even if it did, let's just say we had another housing bubble, and let's say it did increase and double to that effect, the city still would be capped at the point of only having a 3% on residential, 8% on some commercial properties. But the point being is that it's capped there, and we wouldn't recoup those revenues. So the amount of revenue loss that you're going to see, for all intents and purposes, is permanent.
Thank you. And I think this, the last short number crunching I did for a group was if your property value, if your house doubled today in values, it would be 40 to 50 years before the city saw that revenue. And that's astounding. I mean, that's just, because you're 3% max, and then you're going to depreciate 1.5% a year, you have to appreciate 4.5% a year to break even. So your answer, probably a lot closer to mine, is that we never see those revenues again.
Right. Now, and we don't have control over that, as you know. The legislature could. So, I mean, there could be a change in the tax law, but currently, per our tax law, that is the case.
And the reason why I make sure we talk about that is because I think for people saying in a year to two that we'll see those revenues on back, I think CTAX makes up about 30% of our budget.
Used to.
It used to make up 30% of our budget.
Yeah,
you know.
dropping fast.
That's 30% of our budget that we'll never see again. So, thank you, Jeff. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay. Just more housing data. I love this chart for two reasons, because and this is provided by the Center of Regional Studies over at UNR. Talks about the housing bubble. It's something we all know about, but it's a great graphic representation. And showing what they did is they kind of went back to the 1990 and 2000 timeframe and got an average appreciation, if you will, on a quarterly basis. And they said, well, what would happen if we just had an average basis? We would be much higher than where we are now. So it's just an interesting look. You try to use these kinds of things to project into the future. I'm actually seeing this as a hopeful sign. You know, when I see, if you look at the very bottom part of that red line there, we're starting to see some signs of bottoming in the housing market, and that's extremely encouraging. It's been very difficult. As you can see, the drop is astounding. Well, as we all know, we don't have to harp on that a little bit, but what's encouraging about this is that we are seeing some signs, and to be honest with you, you know, you hope that goes back to a somewhat normal trend line. But again, it's one of those we'll wait and see. This is a concern. Home foreclosures, they've started to level off a little bit, but the notice of default still continues to rise. And what you're seeing, we have been seeing, if I can go back to this chart here a little bit, that the median price of the median home price has been starting to tick up. I think you've been reading a paper 2 months in a row, we've had increases. Problem with that, though, if I can continue on to this one, though, is that foreclosures have now started to move into the realm of a higher end range of a home, which kind of artificially rises the median home price. So it's kind of a good news, bad news mix, and I think we've been finding that for the last 3 or 4 years. There's a lot of these, whenever you see some encouraging signs, there's other things to offset it. So what that tells me is that we're not there yet, but we're making progress, and you have to start somewhere, to be honest with you. Other aspects, visitor counts, total gaming win. This is as reported by the RSCVA in their annual reports. Same thing. I thought this was actually kind of interesting that the visitor counts has actually been going down fairly steadily almost for the last decade, and whereas the win has been fairly severely spiking down really over the last couple, 3 years. This is more closer to home. This is our community development, the number of permits issued and the value of those permits issued. And again, this is going back 10 years, and you can see where the 2000 level of activity is, the current 2009 level of activity is well below where we were in 2000. That's kind of represented by that yellow dotted line there. Another thing you can take away from this chart is, you know, this is a fairly dramatic rise in activity, but, you know, just kind of eyeballing it a little bit, more gradual than what we've been dealing with as far as on the downside. So again, it just goes back to the idea of how fast we've had to react to this. This is the last one I wanted to show you regarding the economy, and we don't have one of these charts for Northern Nevada, but this is Southern Nevada, comparing the U.S. Indices of leading economic indicators. The UNLV Center of Business and Economic Research developed these indicators, if you will, from Southern Nevada economic factors, and I put down such as building permits, airport traffic, gasoline consumption, so on and so forth. And they tried to develop a model that matched what was going on nationally, and you can see they actually did a very good job. This is a great model they came up with. There's not one here in the northern area, and from my understanding, it's they had to scrap that project due to budget cuts, ironically enough, but it is what it is. But you can see there's a couple of interesting things on this chart that really point out what we're dealing with here in Nevada and how we're really lagging behind what's going on nationally. This is 9/11. Everybody knows what happened during that time frame, and that's considered a blip. You know, that's a temporary, you know, the recovery was fairly quick. If you even draw, you know, an imaginary line, if you will, it kind of got back to the normal growth pattern fairly quickly. This, what we've been seeing in the last couple of years, is not a blip. This is the Nevada and southern Nevada, but I can imagine this is going to look very similar in northern Nevada if we had this model. The drop, we're back down to 2000, about 1999, 2000 levels of those economic indicators. What's fascinating / scary about this silly thing is that this is the national chart. So we have this divergence of we've been seeing a recovery, and I get comments about that quite a bit. You know, the stock market's getting better. It seems like you know, things are improving on a national level, and this certainly does indicate so. But what we're not seeing is that the same economic recovery is not happening in Nevada yet. Again, if I could sound a little more upbeat, it looks like it might be flattening out. But again, it goes back to the question, what would drive this back up? And to that, I don't know if we have any answers yet. So I thought that was a good chart to end with, as far as kind of showing cumulative with the rest of the charts, just kind of giving a graphic representation of what we've been dealing with both in northern Nevada, southern Nevada, and this disparity from the national economy.
Jeff, thank you for that. I want to point out one thing, maybe two more slides that come next, department expenditures and the general fund, if you could. I think the big question that we've been asked today is, why do we need permanent cuts? Why doesn't temporary cuts work? I think these two, if I'm not mistaken, these two slides will explain, if you would explain why it is that we want to have permanent cuts and temporary cuts won't do what we need, if you would, please.
They would do the job temporarily. You know, the question is, you'd be doing this probably every year. You know, so I think the question that not only our organization, but I imagine a lot of organizations in our area are dealing with the, you know, where do we go from here? What's going to drive us from here? How do we get there? You know, those kinds of answers. What we're looking at is primarily in the as a service organization. It's going to be true for every service organization. I've worked for several nonprofits as well. You're people-based, you know, and your expenses are in your personnel costs. They should be. That's just how it is. We deliver services. That's what you see here in this chart here, where you've got it's a comparison of the revenue and the personnel costs. What we're seeing is it's a red flag, if you will. You know, when you see if you normally track 78%, as it's called out in 05, and that varies from year to year, but let's just call it 75 to 80%, somewhere in that range. Obviously, that's kind of normal, you know. What you see, and again, it goes back to, you know, when I was looking at C-taxes, you're looking at things that signal, wait a minute, red flag, raise that red flag, and it's a warning sign. This is a warning sign, because we all know we've been doing some cuts. We've been chasing this thing for 3 to 4 years. Why are we still seeing a 94.5% amount of our revenue that we get? 94% is still going towards salaries and services, or I'm sorry, salaries and benefits. Well, primarily, we just haven't made enough cuts to keep up with the steepness or the severity, if you will, of those revenue declines. We just haven't kept up. And if I go back, I won't, but if I went back to those other charts, just remember how steep those slides were. Those were dramatic. And someone, you know, we may say, well, yeah, we've cut, you know, up to 29% of our positions, you know, in the last 3 years. Wasn't enough, you know, according to the steepness of the revenue loss. Those are huge numbers to make up. So I think this kind of graphically just represents a red flag, if I could put it in that vernacular, just saying this is a warning sign, because what this basically says is that this is unsustainable. At this revenue structure, you just can't maintain this level of salaries and benefits, and what this basically means is you burn everything else. You're burning into your reserves, your fund balances, your services and supplies. You're not spending money on anywhere else. So, to that point.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. And bottom line, we need to change our culture. We need to change our culture back to where we're only spending 78% or 80% rather than 94 or 95, because we can't do that forever.
That's right. To be sustainable, and here's a picture of what I mean by sustainability. This is a perfect example. Now, we know we've been chasing this thing. We've been making some cuts, and as you can see here, the blue bar, if you will, is our revenues. The tan bar is our expenditures, and the green or red bar is the fund balance, just for the last couple of years. And you can see we've been doing some things. Our expenditures have been decreasing. Let's see, that's $4.4 million on a drop in expenditures. That's admirable. The problem is it didn't get there. The revenues have dropped $10.5 million, if I'm doing my math right, $10.5 million. As you can see, the difference there is the drawdown on the green bar, the fund balance. It dropped from $6.3 million in 2009. If we don't act on expenditure reductions, we're going to actually have a negative fund balance. It's unsustainable. So unfortunately, yes, we've been making some cuts, but they haven't been deep enough to this point.
Thanks, Jeff. Questions? Ms. Ratty?
I did just want to comment on this particular aspect of it, because I think that's also important in terms of why it's why they're permanent. This fiscal year, the year that we are in today, we have spent $3.4 million, by the time we get to the end of the year, $3.4 million more than we have. We've lowered the fund balance to the point it's as low as it can go, and we've emptied the rainy day fund so that we could keep people employed this year. What that means is that next year, we don't have the capacity to do that. There is no rainy day fund, and there is no more room in the ending fund balance to continue to dig into our savings, if you will, to keep people employed. And then I wanted to ask you to clarify something, because you said temporary concessions work temporarily, but that's only true if we get everything that we need in this fiscal year.
That's correct.
And 7.5% temporary concessions do not work for us, even temporarily,
That's right.
because we really need over 11% in this year to balance the budget.
That's right.
It's only if we do it the 7.5 over 2 years.
And even still, even if we did get that, we would have to be back here next year.
And we would still be talking about it next year. But I want to be very clear on that fact.
Absolutely.
If every group came in tomorrow and gave us 7.5% temporary reductions, we would still have to lay off upwards of 28 people.
Or go draw down your fund balance even further.
And there's
But,
really nothing there to
we're
draw
out of
down.
bullets there.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jeff, if we could go back to your slide previously on the percentage of general funds for personnel cost. And one of the comments that was made earlier is we should draw down our supplies more and and keep people employed. And just if I'm doing my math right, we had about 22% that we had services or supplies in 05. We're down to 6%. That tells me we've cut 75% already. And if the remaining that we're talking about now is streetlights, fuels for vehicles, road patching material, that's all we have left. I mean, we don't have a lot of materials. So we get less than 6% of our, or less than 7%, 5.5% of our budget left for supplies. That's not very much money.
And mostly, to piggyback on that, they are fixed costs, fuel costs, utilities, just similar to any home budget, same kind of thing. You've got to run your heater, things like that. We're down to the point we cut that to the point where we could.
So if the lights go off, we didn't pay our light bill this month.
You might want to check.
All right, thanks.
Okay, Jeff, is that it?
Yes, I think so.
Go ahead.
No, that was it.
Mr. Carey? Is it on you?
I did provide the council a memorandum which does run through our recommendations this year. And it's important today to receive direction from the council to Jeff and the city manager so that we can do the work that's required to build the final budget document. We'll be returning on May 18th to have your final direction. And following that date, we will prepare the document that goes to the state, which must be due by the end of the month of May. It's been a very difficult year for the city of Sparks. The transition that we are confronting here is the need to stabilize our spending in the long term against our revenues. And that budget, this budget that's presented to you today does achieve that goal. And we are seeking the unfortunate reductions in staff. There are 46 individuals in the general fund and others in the other funds that need to be reduced. And it is, I see little ability to avoid the layoffs if we're not able to reach the 7.5% permanent concessions. I think it's very difficult in our public safety departments to look at the cuts that I have recommended to this council and find acceptance to those because of the realities that our police and firefighters find on the street. It's also very true that we do not have the capacity to cut further in non-public safety departments, as public safety is somewhere in excess of 60% of our budget. And we have already cut public works and parks and administration in advance of this fiscal year. We have tried to bring forth the priorities of each department, but I would remind departments and employees that we do have to meld together a fabric that represents the overall services we can provide. The council is correct. This is about services. This is about taking the number one resource we provide to our citizens, and that's our employees, and reducing their capabilities. And I believe that these cuts are necessary, and that's why we have recommended them to you today. I would ask that we continue to work with all of our employee groups to try and find a way to reduce the number of layoffs. And I would like to do that as they have all been willing to meet with us by continuing that process. But we simply have to act, and would choose to make a recommendation today, which includes very serious reductions in service, but does place us on the path for financial stability, with the hope that those layoffs can be reversed by achieving the structural pay changes that are necessary for us to avoid them. And Jeff and myself, your police chief, fire chief, are all here to answer any questions you may have regarding the series cuts we're confronted with.
Okay, questions? Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I've stated in meetings that in January, we gave pretty clear direction to staff. Those were to come up with the 7.5% or the amount needed to go ahead and balance the budget and do those with permanent cuts, and to be fair across the board to all departments. I think we're out there with several different departments, and I want to commend to, like I said, the police department. We have several of the supervision bargaining groups that have given up 7.5% for 2 years, guaranteed reductions. And I don't know if I have that list here or not. I think we should recognize those folks and thank them for doing that. I do have it. The department heads all gave up 7.5% for 2 years. Mid-management professionals and technical deputy police chiefs gave up. Confidential employees gave it up. The assistants, the city attorney's office was above and beyond what they called. They almost gave up 300% of their budget, or what they were asked for, to go ahead and reductions. Thank you, Mr. Chet, for giving up 300% of your budget. No. And so I think those all departments should be commended. I would like to go ahead and see that all permanent reductions that have been placed in front of the council be accepted. And if the department is short on those goals, such as the police department, that we work that out with the police department to include layoffs or find a way to go ahead and make those cuts in there, and the departments that have not come up with permanent cuts, so we authorize the city manager for layoffs for those departments to balance their budgets for 7.5%.
Is that a motion, Mr. Schmidt?
I will make that a motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
Could I get him, just
discussion?
repeat that, please? The whole motion?
Sure, we accept all the permanent reductions that have been put in front of us, all the groups I mentioned. We accept the 5.4% for the police department, and I believe in what I've heard is that the police department will go back and look at the other 2%, or 1.9, whatever they need to go ahead and come up with to make it that they would do layoffs in that department. Ask the police chief to come back and give us that list, or authorize the city manager to work with its police chief for those layoffs. And any department that did not bring permanent pay cuts in, we authorize the city manager to do layoffs in those departments to equal to 7.5%.
Do you have a second?
You know, I'm not quite sure I understand. I know we want to move forward. The motion says move forward with the suggested layoffs from the city manager. I, for one, do not want to lay off any police. And at the most, maybe 2 of the police assistants. It's a whole department, and it needs everyone in that department to run that department. So if you could, I will second the motion if you amend it to that.
I'm trying to be delicate here, not to tell any department what they can or cannot do within their I want to see each department come up with 7.5% in permanent reductions, and I'm hesitant at this point to tell each department who they need to contact, but if my motion fails, then...
Okay, do we have a second to Mr. Schmidt's motion? Okay, seeing no second, we'll move on to discussion. Mr. Smith, do you have anything else, or?
Well, I'll make another motion if I could.
Go ahead.
I move to authorize the city manager to continue with the layoffs, although to continue discussions with all bargaining groups. Continue with the layoffs, with the exception of police and police assistants. Lay off no more than 2.
We have a second to that motion.
You know, I'm going to second that for discussion.
Okay.
Because I think we need to be a little bit more, do need to be a little clearer for you, Sean? Because what and I'm going to put this on Ron as far as the motion, but I think we have one called the city manager's recommending the reduction plan permanent concessions only alternative. And is that the one you're referring to? And that's the one that will not lay off any of the police officers except for the 6 that get laid off and get rehired immediately because of the cops grant. Does everybody see what I'm referring to?
Yeah.
This guy here.
It's the one at the top that says,
that's-
city manager recommended reduction plan, permanent concessions only alternative. That's the one I'm referring to.
Okay, and that says lay off 6 officers, but we'll rehire them, but it doesn't say anything about the assistants.
Police
in there.
assistants.
Right.
That's what
And
I
that's
had
what I
in
was
there.
going to say. So you're referring to that,
To this
one?
recommendation, and
Okay,
then
but I
the,
want to make sure that, Sean, you understand what we're saying, right?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure everybody in the audience understands what we're saying. And I don't know if they do that.
the recommendation was to lay off 8 police assistants, and I don't want to do that. No more than 2.
Okay.
I think that's the only difference in the.
No, there is another difference, and that is, there was also layoff 6 police officers on top of the other 6 that are going to get,
And
and
that's
that's not...
not in the motion.
Okay, that's not in the
Yeah,
motion.
but it's-
So basically, it's the permanent concession only alternative, and the difference you want is to only lay off 2 police assistants.
Yes.
Yeah, the layoff of the 6 police officers says removed based on.
Right, but I don't think anybody out there has it. I'm trying to make sure that everybody understands what we're doing, okay? And you also said that there's a caveat that if the unions come back with permanent concessions before May 18th, we can adjust.
We can adjust, yes.
I will second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Smith, seconded by Mr. Kerrigan. We have discussion. Ms. Ratty?
So I just want to say that back, because I do think, based on some of the looks in the audience, that it's not particularly clear, because not everybody has the
Right,
same
that-
thing.
okay,
So I'm going to
that was-
say it back one more time.
Okay.
So there's the budget recommendations that have been made by the city manager. what I believe that we would be saying is that because the police department, or specifically the police unions, came in with permanent reductions, that we are going to then recognize that by not laying off the 6 police officers that were slated for layoff. This is the first step. And then there's an additional recommendation to only lay off 2 police assistants to maintain the service level in the police department and their ability to respond to the needs of the citizens. My challenge with that is where we're going to make up the difference, because I think the concession, the permanent concession allows for you to not lay off those 6 police officers. But when you throw in the police assistants as well, then that does mean that 5 or 6 employees from someplace else in the city would have to be laid off to make that work, to make that bottom line. And again, this is my problem, is I'm hoping I'm being very consistent here, is we have to come up with a solution that meets the bottom line. And so I would be asking the motion maker, or, for discussion for the rest of the council, where is the rest of that? How are we going to balance that part?
Are you asking me?
I'm throwing it out for discussion.
Do you want discussion from maybe Mr. Carey to explain that?
I would say look at the alternative service impacts with no police officer layoffs. That's in our budget book. And I don't have a page number, or I'd tell you. Right.
I'm trying to be transparent. Sorry, trying to be as transparent here as possible. So that is information that is public. And let me get to it.
Tell us what page it is.
I'd love to, but there's no page number.
It's right after the service impacts.
So I could give you a page number, but I'd be guessing.
In the city manager's alternative, in the city manager's alternative for the budget, where I was laying off additional positions in order not to lay off the police officers, in this particular motion, we would need additional layoffs elsewhere in the city. Those were identified as a purchasing person, Parks and Recreation worker and specialist, a park maintenance worker, and a Public Works facility maintenance worker. And those additional positions amount to approximately the money that you would need to maintain the 2 police assistants. One caveat that I am aware of that I wanted to make sure that you were aware of, we also have an elimination of the property evidence technician that the chief was very concerned about. So I would like some latitude to work with the police chief on the balance of the 2 police assistants versus that evidence technician, just to make sure I give him a chance to find the best cuts possible. Just a little more flexibility, and that would be helpful.
And also, I think that Ms. Reddy had a problem with the recreation specialist also, that you could
I'll
take
attempt
a
to
look
find
at that position also.
Okay, if you included that in your motion, to attempt to avoid the recreation specialist, and then you would authorize me to make one additional FTE cut from within the city.
I'm sorry, it's a long motion, but I can add that in.
And
I don't have a problem.
I'll amend my second.
Okay, we're still at discussion. Let's make sure everyone understands the motion. Everybody okay with the motion so far? Okay, continued discussion. Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if I understand, we're 6 police assistants. We're not going to lay on off, but we're going to lay off 1 full-time maintenance worker, 1 full-time purchasing agent, 1 full-time recreational facility worker, 1 full-time parks maintenance worker 2, and as well as an unknown at this time position. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's how I understand it.
I'm going to go ahead and vote against the motion, because I think it parts from our direction we gave the city manager in January, and I want to get away from telling the city manager and picking one department over another. I think that we gave very clear directions in January, and I would like to go ahead and stick with that direction. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I have Mr. Kerrigan up. Are you done, Mr. Kerrigan?
No, I just wanted to say a few things, and this is a tough position to be in. And once again, I'd like to say that you have until May 18th. I really wish all of you would come back with a 7.5% permanent pay reduction, and we don't have to do this. But you put us in a corner up here. At least I feel like I'm in a corner and I have nowhere to go. It's all about service levels to me. This city council made public safety the number one priority. Our police department, I have the numbers, I could spew them out there if you'd wish, but I got a lot of numbers on fire and police. I think it's not pretty, but this is the only option that we have. And I apologize if some of you think we're picking some department over another, but in essence, that's what we really are doing, because we're putting public safety as number one. Yes, we're laying off some firefighters. I hope you go back to your union, the 11 firefighters whose jobs are on the chopping block, and talk to your brothers and sisters and see if they'll give up the 7.5% to keep you working. That's the only thing that I don't understand. And I know that I get chastised by some of my council members up here on how naive I am. I just don't understand why you can't do that. And if somebody would like to explain that to me, that you would rather have somebody lose a job than give up 7.5%, please come and talk to me and convince me that that's the right thing to do, because I don't believe it's the right thing to do. And I know it's a lot of money, but if we're going to talk about it, I bought a house here in 1991, and it just went back to where it was in 1994, okay? So that's where my house is. I understand everybody's problem. I pay bills too. All of you are neighbors. It's not like I don't know any of you. The fire chief lives, he lives 3 doors down from me. I know all of you, and this is tough for me. And I understand where you're coming from on certain things, but I really don't. Gene, you and I will never see eye to eye. I have no clue why you guys can't do this, okay? I really don't. And anybody else that won't give up the 7.5%, I just don't understand that, and I'm sorry, but somebody try to explain it to me. I'm not that hard-headed, but I am a little hard-headed, but I apologize.
Ms. Ratty? There's no, we're not under public comment, so. Ms. Ratty?
See me afterwards.
I want to echo just how difficult this is, and re-emphasize that I really do believe that we need every single employee to maintain even the most basic of service levels in the city right now. And I hope that's clear. We are backed in a corner. The 7.5% temporary with contingencies, and there were a number of you who came up here and made offers that, to my knowledge, never made it to the bargaining table. I think 15% permanent over 2 years, never made it to the bargaining table. The only thing that we can respond to is the last best offer that was presented to us by our management team. And the last best offer from 2 of the labor groups came in with temporary concessions and a series of contingencies. They were, we'll do this, but we want this, and this as well back. We're not in a position where we can guarantee anything. What we need to save jobs is 7.5% permanent with no conditions. And so I am urging every group, including police, to go back, and even though there's been a lot of movement on this council to recognize the service level, that's still what we need. And look out across the room, because other people's jobs that are basic service levels are going to go away if we can't hit that 7.5%. And I understand the service levels, you made a compelling argument, and we're trying to protect those. But that's what we need. And you've got a limited amount of time now, clock is ticking, because we have no other way to solve this. So I'm not going to support the motion, and I will on one very specific point. I'm willing to meet the police halfway. They came in with 5.4 permanent concessions. I'm willing to save those 6 officers because of that. I'm not willing to then also throw the police assistants in and spread that around to the rest of the city. I can't support that piece of it. But I will recognize that permanent concession, because frankly, that is what we need, and I thank you for it.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Thank you, Mayor. Also, the city manager would like that, in that motion, that we accept the permanent pay reductions from those that were willing to give it, and I want to thank those people personally.
So is that, everyone understand that's in the motion? Okay, before we vote, one quick comment. No good outcomes here. We had any of any of the concessions, or whatever you want to call it, or the budget proposals, or the recommendations, none of them were any good. But, having said that, we have to do something, and I want to applaud the council for sticking in there. I want to thank the people that have been negotiating with our unions, and I want to thank the unions for sitting down with us, and I'll hope there'll be some more talks before this comes final on May 18th, and we'll go from there. And if anybody has a phone that's on, you might want to put it on buzz. Ms. Ratty?
I just wanted clarification on the motion on the Parks and Recreation facility worker. Was that excluded? That wasn't?
No, that was added in.
That's it.
It was added in. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Salerno?
If any of the bargaining groups decide to come back and we negotiate with them, we'll bring this back to the council, Sean.
Phil, we'll bring you the results of any changes in the bargaining groups as well as the groups that are working with us. But we do need to move forward with the layoffs, and part of the need of the city is to use our financial capacity this year to carry out the costs that are associated with that, so that we can start next fiscal year. Any employees that would be laid off as a result of this motion can be quickly restored with the permanent concessions coming in, and we would choose to avoid that by reaching those permanent concessions that the council has spoken about today.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. The motion passes 3-2. Okay. Let's move on to item number 4. Consideration and possible direction of the Sparks Redevelopment Agency tentative budget recommendations for fiscal year 10-11. Why don't we, Armando, why don't you wait for a couple minutes until the room... I guess you really know how to clear a room, huh, Armando?
How'd you do? How'd the bonds go? Do we know on the bonds yet?
Yes, they will. She's on her way. She just emailed me.
Cool. Went better than I thought, based on last Friday.
Hey, I guess that's what you might read.
Yeah, I think I got it figured out.
I don't get it. And I almost want to take the but they park back where exactly.
I don't understand that either.
I don't either.
Okay, let's call the meeting back to order for number 4, consideration possible direction of Sparks Development Agency. Armando.
Thank you, Mayor Martini. Actually, I think Mr. Cronk is going to lead off here with an overview of the budget for the redevelopment agency.
Long time no talk. Just moving. Actually, everything I've got here is at the very back of your book if you want to follow along. We're just going to cover right through starting redevelopment 1, and these are just the highlights. Fairly straight.
Lowlights.
I'm sorry?
The lowlights.
Actually, the redevelopment areas aren't as bad off on the valuation as we're seeing throughout the rest of the city, or even really the rest of the county. Primarily driven, by the types of properties that are in there for redevelopment 1, and then also 2. That's the one area probably in the city that's had some development to offset the declines. So in 1, property taxes are expected to decline about 3.9% from fiscal. I'm sorry, 3.9% in fiscal 11 from fiscal year 10. The other primary revenue source there is motor vehicle privilege taxes, which is set by statute, so we don't expect any changes there. And then there's some other smaller revenues that include property rentals, facade loan, so on and so forth, as you can see there. The ending fund balance, the unreserved portion, is expected to be roughly $2 million. So those are our sources. I went too far. And then our expenditures for Area 1. The common service charges are expected to go down, as well as the interfund services provided. As we decrease the personnel throughout the city, that obviously is expected to go down. And then the special events revenue as a net cost is expected to decrease by 7.2%. Debt service, currently we stand at $2,557,000 as under our current structure. You'll have another item that I'm going to bring before you during the redevelopment agency meeting for a refunding of the bonds that we issued back in 2000. We're trying to reissue these on a refinancing is really what it is. Approved it back in November, and actually we just had some pricing today. So we're expecting the debt service to if I remember my numbers right from this morning, to decrease by about $270,000 from on an annual basis starting next year. Net present value of that refunding, we should see savings just under $1 million on that, but we'll cover that in the regular agency meeting. But I did include those potential savings in the proposed budget before you. Transfers out are staying relatively flat in fiscal 11 compared to fiscal 10, and that's $311,000. That's for the agency's portion of debt service of those bonds that were issued in 2007. This is just a summary of the debt obligation that we have that we're currently underway of trying to refinance, and it just gives you the detail there. There shouldn't be any change that we're expecting. It's still going to be maturing in 2023, but now we're expecting interest rates to be significantly lower. The unreserved ending fund balance, we're expecting fiscal 10 to be about $1.7 million, and fiscal 11 just over, right at about $2 million. But this is primarily where the discussion piece comes from, because that's where discretionary projects would be funded. And to that, I think I'd want Armando to talk about the rest of the projects that might be available.
Armando Ornelas, City Planner. Really, what we're looking at is again, there is a potential ending fund balance at the end of FY11 of just a little over $2 million. I think there's a slide here that shows any number of potential projects. I think in the interest of time today, what staff would recommend is, in fact, that this summer that the agency convene a workshop to really do some strategic planning in terms of, I guess at this point in the life of the agency, with 13 years remaining in the life of the agency, to focus on what the agency board wants to accomplish in terms of the remaining life of this district and how it wants to accomplish it, and then accordingly to allocate its resources for example, for some combination of developer incentives and or capital projects to accomplish those objectives. So I think the Chief Administrative Officer's direction to staff is that we look to convene that workshop sometime this summer. There is a couple of things on here that we might be bringing to you before that, just because they're pending requests. But in terms of Area 1, that would be the approach that we would recommend to the agency board.
Armando, I got some questions. Mr. Schmidt, or Jeff, whichever.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Armando, for the sake of time and good government, I do want to talk about these. And, I would like to know, are any of these built into your budget right now?
No, none of these are built into the budget right now. The projects that are built into the current year budget have been accounted for, and so this ending fund balance of just a little over $2.8 million that's projected for the end of fiscal year 11 is a unallocated amount.
So on a budget day in which we just laid off 50-some people, I see a project on there that we said no to, and I've never heard another thing about it. What is the Century Theater XD Auditorium? for $95,000.
Mr. Schmidt, that is a pending request from the Downtown Theater for assistance with a project that they would like to undertake at their Downtown Sparks facility. That would be a request that we would bring forward, and the agency board could consider it at that time. This is not a project that has been budgeted for or otherwise approved in any sense. It's simply a request that staff has made note of it in the past. And again, that is a request that we would bring forward for your consideration. It would be the agency board's decision as to whether it's funded or not.
And I guess I'll go back to my question, is why on a budget hearing are we talking about projects that may come forward next year?
Councilman Schmidt, the thought here was that you have a discretionary amount of your budget available in the next fiscal year, and it was a natural thing to bring forward some of the things that have been discussed to date as potential projects. We're not asking you to approve any projects today. We're simply bringing them, making note of them here because they are requests that might come forward in the coming year.
Somehow I have this feeling that I elevated to federal politics here where we slide something into the budget hoping we can get it passed and say, well, you approved the budget and we had $623,000 hidden on a line item, so you de facto went ahead and approved this project. And I, for one, without getting advance notice of this item, seeing it down in a book is very upset. Thank you.
I don't think we've made any decision on these, have we?
No, we have not made any decision. Again, this was simply a list of projects that have been discussed, in most cases at least once, and it was, an effort here to simply lay out some of the possibilities for next year. I think Mr. Carey would like to comment.
The clear intention of the Chief Administrative Officer is to have you consider your capital improvement program, these projects, and obtain through a workshop your direction on where you want to go in your capital plan. The inclusion of these were to simply show you what we have heard in the past or we have heard from developers. We are not seeking your approval of the spending list today. What we think is important with 13 years remaining in this district, that we convene you to look at what goals you want to set and how you want to use the remaining capital capacity we have to achieve those goals. And that would be done at a later date. You would be establishing for the budget that we do budget revenues which are in the discretionary classification so that they could be spent based upon the agency's further action.
Let's do. Mr. Kerrigan.
I prefer that the potential projects in Area 1 and 2 be left out completely, only because Rod brought it up. I mean, we just sat here for, an hour and a half talking about, laying off 20, 30 people, and then we're talking about putting in a new movie theater that's not our movie theater and code enforcement. And I would just rather say, don't even talk about it. I don't want to see it in the press. I don't want to even talk about the area projects until we sit down at our workshop, and then we can bring them up.
And that's probably the intention of this.
That is the exact intent that we have placed before you.
Okay. Well, then I guess we'll handle that in the motion.
Mr. Salerno.
Jeff, I remember years ago, you gave those facade codes. How much money's outstanding on those?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but I could look that up for you.
When you get a chance.
Absolutely.
No, I know.
That's a good point, because there's like
It does.
250,000.
I'll find that out for you.
Give me a list of the people, the people that.
Just whole
Certainly.
council.
Oh, certainly.
Ms. Ratty.
No, I just wanted, I believe that the chair and I should take responsibility for that list existing. Again, it was intended purely as a heads up of these
There
are
you go.
anything that has been discussed in the past year, anything that staff has been asked to look at, not necessarily even by us, by anyone, just so that you knew that they were there, not intended to be approved as any part of the budget, and that was something that we asked the staff to bring forward.
Do these projects that are listed here and the money listed here have anything to do with the layoffs we just went through?
No.
No. So whether we did these or not, doesn't affect the people we just laid off.
These are two
does it?
separate items, the redevelopment budget versus the city budget.
Yeah, but
Go ahead, Armando.
everybody understands that.
Well, that was all the comment I had on Area 1. I think Jeff is going to run through the numbers for Area 2 if you have no further questions regarding Area 1.
Okay, moving on to redevelopment 2. Again, I think I briefly mentioned that property taxes in the redevelopment areas are faring better than the rest of the city. Area 2 is probably the best performing area, and it's relatively flat. I think it was a 0.4% increase, if I remember right, going into fiscal 11. No bond issuances are expected in fiscal 11, and fund balance is expected to decrease by approximately $945,000, which we'll get into here because of the expenditures. Debt service is expected to increase by approximately $815,000, and that was due to the increment financing that we issued last year. Common service charges, similar to Area 1, is expected to decrease in fiscal 11, and transfers out of just over $1 million. That's consistent for the last several years, which is the agency's portion of the debt service for those 2007 bonds. Again, here are the debt obligations for Area 2. The most recent being that 2009 tax increment bonds, which we will begin paying interest on next year. Ending fund balance this year expected to be $2.7 million. Next year expected to be $1.8 million, and just the same look as area number 1. That's the discretionary portion. That would be after the required bond reserves.
Would you like me to comment on this slide, or prefer that I not?
I think it's the
Same look. All right, that's all we have.
What do you think?
That's actually pretty funny, Armand.
What else?
You know when to fold them.
I have nothing further.
So what kind of a motion are you looking for here? What kind of direction? What do you need?
This is the same procedure as the cities. This is the recommended budget for the agency, and we're going to bring it back just same day as we will for the city on May 18th. In fact, it'll be right after the city's presentation the city's open public comment that we'll have on the tentative budget. Then I'll immediately turn around and bring back the final budget. So what we need from you today is if you accept this as a recommended budget for fiscal year 11.
Questions? Motion? Ms. Ratty?
Move to approve the budget as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Smith, second. Moved by Councilwoman Ratty, seconded by Councilman Smith to approve the recommendations as outlined by staff. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Whoops. Oh, you did vote, I'm sorry. Passes 4-1. Mr. Schmidt is a nay. Okay, number 5, discussion of city council meetings, communications, and opportunities to work together. Mr. Carey? I don't know what this is about.
This is just a placeholder for these spring city council workshops in case you wanted to change any of our operating procedures. I have no recommendations or comments from the council to act upon today.
Okay, comments from the city council, city manager. Everybody's talked out. Seeing no further business, we're adjourned.